It started like any other December morning in our suburban Boston home. The snow was falling gently outside our bedroom window, coating our neighbor's SUV in a thin white blanket. I rolled over and checked my phone. 7:30 a.m. Sarah was still sleeping peacefully beside me, her dark hair spread across the pillow. After 18 years of marriage, she could still take my breath away. "Let me sleep in, Michael," she mumbled, pulling the covers tighter. "The girls won't be up for hours." She was right about that. Our daughters, Ashley and Madison, had inherited their mother's love of sleeping late on weekends, especially during winter break. I climbed out of bed, careful not to disturb her further. As I passed the girls' rooms, I could hear Ashley's music playing softly. At 16, she was already showing signs of the woman she would become: confident, smart, and fiercely protective of her younger sister. Madison, 14 and artistic, was probably still dreaming about her latest painting project. The kitchen was quiet and cold. I started the coffee maker and began pulling out ingredients for breakfast. The girls had been begging for my famous chocolate chip pancakes all week. As I mixed the batter, my mind wandered to our upcoming ski trip to Stowe. We'd been planning it for months. The girls were excited about trying snowboarding for the first time. "Dad, is that chocolate I smell?" Ashley appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her favorite MIT sweatshirt. She'd been talking about applying there since she was 12. "Can I help?" I handed her the spatula with a smile. Madison joined us soon after, her dark curls still messy from sleep. "Mom's not up yet." There was something in her tone that made me pause. She said she had a late meeting yesterday. The girls exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. Sarah finally emerged around 9, dressed in what I recognized as her important meeting outfit, the navy blazer and pencil skirt she wore when she needed to make an impression. "Girls, we need to talk about the ski trip," she announced, not meeting my eyes. My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. It was the same one she'd used when she told me about her promotion to marketing director 3 months ago. The one that came with longer hours and frequent team-building events. "I think we should postpone it," she continued. "Something's come up at work." The girls' faces fell. "But Mom, we've been planning this forever," Madison protested. "All our gear is ready." "Life doesn't always give us what we want," Sarah replied, her voice eerily calm. "We can go during spring break instead." She was using her professional voice now, the one she reserved for difficult clients. I felt the weight of my phone in my pocket. The text from Linda, James's ex-wife, was still open. "You need to know what's happening. Call me." I called her yesterday. The story she told me had kept me awake all night. James Thompson, Sarah's college boyfriend, who'd mysteriously reappeared as the new chief marketing officer. The man who, according to Linda, had a pattern of pursuing married women in every city he worked in. "The girls are going skiing," I heard myself say. My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. "We promised them." Sarah's head snapped up, surprise flickering across her face. "Michael, we discussed this," she started, but I cut her off. "No, you suggested it. I never agreed." The girls were watching us, tension visible in their shoulders. They'd never seen us argue like this before. "Dad's right," Ashley said firmly. "We're going skiing." Madison nodded vigorously beside her. Sarah looked between them, something like panic crossing her features. "I've been reading about marriage dynamics," she began, slipping into her sociology major voice. "Sometimes couples need space to grow individually." The words sounded rehearsed, as if she'd practiced them. I reached for my phone again, hitting record in my pocket. The conversation that followed would be important later, I knew. For the courts, for the girls, for my own sanity. "Space," I repeated. "Is that what you're calling it?" The girls were silent now, watching their mother with a new understanding in their eyes. They were old enough to read between the lines. "It's a common practice in modern relationships," Sarah continued, "taking time apart to explore our individual identities." But her hands were shaking as she reached for her coffee cup. I thought about the hotel receipts Linda had shown me, the team lunches that stretched late into the evening, the weekend conferences that somehow never appeared on the company calendar. The girls and I are leaving in an hour, I announced. We'll be at Stowe, just like we planned. I turned to Ashley and Madison. Go pack your bags. They didn't hesitate, disappearing upstairs in record time. Sarah followed me to our bedroom as I began packing. Michael, please. Let's talk about this rationally. But there was nothing rational about betrayal. Nothing logical about destroying 18 years of trust. We'll talk when I get back, I said, zipping my bag closed. Maybe you can use this time to explore your individual identity. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Within 45 minutes, the girls and I were in my Subaru, heading north. The snow was falling harder now, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing faster than the windshield wipers. Dad, Ashley said softly from the passenger seat. We know about Mom and Mr. Thompson. Madison leaned forward from the back. Everyone at school knows. We just didn't know how to tell you. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. How long have you known? Since the Halloween party, Madison replied. When Mom said she had to stay late for inventory planning. But we saw her Instagram posts, Ashley added. She was at the Legacy Hotel's rooftop bar. With him. The Legacy Hotel. The same one Lynette had mentioned. My daughters had known for 2 months what I'd just discovered yesterday. They'd been protecting me all this time. I pulled into a rest stop, needing a moment to process this. The girls waited patiently as I composed myself. I'm so sorry you had to carry that. I finally managed. You shouldn't have had to. We're on your side, Dad, Ashley said firmly. Madison nodded in agreement. Always. In that moment, watching the snow fall around us, I realized something important. Our family wasn't falling apart. It was just changing shape. I pulled out my phone and called my college roommate, Pete. He managed the Stowe Mountain Resort now. Hey, brother. His familiar voice brought a small measure of comfort. I need a favor. As I explained our situation, Pete didn't hesitate. I've got a private cabin near the North Slopes. It's yours as long as you need it. He paused. And Michael, you're doing the right thing. Back on the road, the girls chatted quietly about snowboarding lessons. Their resilience amazed me. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Sarah, but I ignored them all. We had 4 hours of driving ahead of us. 4 hours to put distance between us and the betrayal we were leaving behind. 4 hours to start healing. Ashley plugged her phone into the car's speakers. Taylor Swift's voice filled the car, singing about karma and revenge. Madison giggled from the back seat. Really, Ash? What? It's appropriate. I couldn't help but smile. My girls were stronger than I'd ever imagined. They were going to be okay. We all were. The snow continued to fall as we drove north, covering our tracks. Somewhere behind us, Sarah was probably realizing her carefully planned weekend was unraveling. But ahead of us lay freedom and the promise of a new beginning. Pete was waiting for us when we arrived, standing in front of a beautiful wooden cabin. Welcome to your home away from home, he grinned, helping us with our bags. Inside, a fire was already crackling in the hearth. The cafeteria is open late tonight, he told us. And I've arranged for private snowboarding lessons tomorrow morning. He handed me a key. Take all the time you need, brother. That night, as the girls slept upstairs, I sat by the fire and finally let myself cry. Not for the marriage I was losing, that had been gone longer than I'd realized, but for the pain my daughters had carried alone, for the trust that had been shattered, and for the uncertain future that lay ahead. My phone showed 27 missed calls from Sarah, and 1 text from Linda. You're not alone in this. Stay strong. I shut off my phone and watched the flames dance. Tomorrow would be a new day, and we would face it together. Our first morning at Stowe dawned bright and cold. The girls were up early, eager to start their snowboarding lessons. I watched from the lodge as they strapped on their gear. looking like colorful astronauts in their new snowsuits. They're naturals, Pete said, appearing beside me with two steaming cups of coffee, just like their old man was back in college. He handed me one of the cups. How are you holding up? I took a long sip before answering. The girls make it easier. Through the window, I could see Ashley helping Madison adjust her goggles. They're so much stronger than I ever was at their age. My phone buzzed again. Sarah's mother this time. I let it go to voicemail, just like all the others. She's called everyone, I told Pete. My parents, her parents, our neighbors. Looking for you. Looking for control. The instructor was leading the girls to the bunny slope now. Madison fell immediately, but bounced right back up, laughing. Ashley gave her a high five. You know, Pete said carefully, Linda called me yesterday. I turned to look at him. James Thompson's ex-wife. He nodded. We dated briefly in college, after he left her. Small world. Get smaller. She told me about the others. My stomach clenched. Others. James has a pattern. Pete's voice was gentle but firm. 3 cities in 5 years. Always married women. Always his subordinates. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter in my mouth. How many? That Linda knows of? 7. He paused. Including Sarah. Outside, Ashley had managed to stand up on her board. She was slowly sliding down the slope, arms outstretched for balance. Madison cheered her on. Their joy seemed surreal against the darkness of this conversation. There's more, Pete continued. James disappeared 2 days ago. What do you mean, disappear? Cleaned out his office. Canceled his phone. Gone. Just like he'd done to Linda. Just like he'd apparently done to all the others. My phone buzzed again. This time, I answered. Michael, thank God. It was Linda. Have you seen the news? I put her on speaker so Pete could hear. James is being investigated for embezzlement. Her voice was shaking. He's been stealing from every company he worked for. The affairs were just cover. Pete realized. A distraction while he moved money around. Sarah doesn't know yet, Linda continued. But she will soon. The FBI is involved. My head was spinning. How much did he steal? Millions, Linda replied. He used the marketing budget to hide transfers. That's why he always went after marketing directors. The pieces were falling into place now. The late-night meetings. The unauthorized expenses. Sarah's sudden interest in temporary separation. Michael. Linda's voice was urgent now. Check your accounts. Sarah had access to everything, right? My blood ran cold. I pulled up my banking app with trembling fingers. Our savings account was empty. The college fund we'd been building for the girls gone. All transferred out yesterday morning. I have to call the bank, I managed to say. Pete was already on his phone. I'm calling my lawyer. He's the best in Boston. Stay where you are, Linda advised. Let the lawyers handle this. I watched my daughters through the window. They were both up on their boards now, making slow but steady progress. They had no idea their college fund had just vanished, that their mother might be implicated in a federal crime. The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls. The bank managed to freeze some of the transfers. Pete's lawyer, David, was ruthlessly efficient. We'll file for emergency custody today, he said, and get a restraining order against both Sarah and James. By afternoon, news of James's scheme had broken. My phone exploded with notifications. Sarah's face was all over the local news, labeled as a person of interest. The girls came in from their lesson to find me sitting shell-shocked in front of the lodge's TV. Dad, Ashley's voice was small. Is that Mom? Madison pressed against my side. What did she do? I pulled them both close. How do you tell your children that their mother might go to jail? That the comfortable life we built might come crashing down? We need to talk, I said quietly. Over hot chocolate, I told them everything. About James's history of fraud. About the missing money. About the investigation. They listened in silence, their faces growing paler with each revelation. But our college fund, Madison whispered. All my babysitting money. Ashley wrapped an arm around her sister. We'll figure it out, Maddie. We always do. My phone rang again. This time it was Sarah. The girls nodded, understanding what I needed to do. I stepped outside to take the call. Michael, please, she was crying. I didn't know. You have to believe me. Did you transfer the money, Sarah? A long pause. He said it was temporary, just to protect it during the audit. When did you know? About the fraud? Another pause. Last week, but he promised he'd fix it. I thought about all the lies, all the carefully constructed stories, all the pain she caused our daughters. The FBI is looking for you, I said flatly. They think you were involved. I wasn't. I swear. But how could I believe her now? Dad. Ashley was standing in the doorway. Dave is on the other line. He says the police are at our house. I turned back to my phone. Sarah, call a lawyer. A good one. Michael, wait, dash. I hung up. The next call was from Sarah's father, a retired judge. He'd always been fond of me. I've arranged for her surrender, he said heavily. She's on her way to the police station now. The girls will stay with you. I'll make sure of it. That night, none of us could sleep. We sat in front of the fire, the girls curled up on either side of me. The news played quietly on my laptop. Sarah's booking photo appeared on screen. Madison quickly closed the browser. What happens now? Ashley asked. I wished I had a better answer for her. We take it one day at a time. Together, Madison added firmly. Always together. Outside, snow was falling again, covering everything in a clean, white blanket, hiding the chaos below. But some messes couldn't be covered up. Some betrayals ran too deep. All we could do was hold on to each other and wait for morning. Spring came early to Boston that year. The snow had barely melted when Sarah's trial began. I sat in the back of the courtroom, watching as our life together was dissected by lawyers and investigators. The girls refused to attend. We don't need to see it, Ashley had said firmly. We're focusing on the future, right, Dad? She was already looking at scholarships, determined not to let the loss of her college fund define her path. Madison threw herself into her art. Her paintings grew darker, more complex. Her art teacher entered one in a state competition. It won first place. Paint into beauty, she told me when I hung it in our living room. The prosecution proved Sarah's involvement was minimal. She'd been manipulated, they said, a pawn in James's larger scheme, but she'd still made choices, still betrayed our trust, still risked everything we'd built together. She got 18 months. James, still missing, was sentenced in absentia to 15 years. The newspapers called it justice. The girls called it closure. I wasn't sure what to call it. Pete's sister Emily started dropping by the cabin on weekends. She was a child psychologist, recently divorced, with an 8-year-old son named Jack. At first, she came to check on the girls. Then she started staying for dinner. Dad's different when she's here. I overheard Madison telling Ashley one night. He smiles more. Good, Ashley replied. He deserves to smile. Emily understood trauma. She knew when to push and when to stay silent. She taught me how to help the girls process their anger, how to rebuild trust, how to hope again. Her son Jack idolized Ashley and Madison. They taught him to snowboard. He taught them to build epic snow forts. Somehow, watching them play together helped heal something in all of us. Summer brought changes. Ashley got accepted to MIT with a full scholarship. They were impressed by my essay, she grinned. Apparently, resilience in the face of family trauma makes compelling reading. Madison's art was featured in a youth gallery. Emily helped her price her pieces. By the end of the opening night, she'd sold enough to start a new college fund. On my own terms, she said proudly. Sarah wrote to us from prison. Long letters full of apologies and explanations. The girls read them, but didn't write back. Not yet. Maybe someday, Madison said. But not today. I found James's new identity through Linda's network of scorned wives. He was in Argentina, already working on his next scheme. The FBI was grateful for the tip. The girls were grateful for the closure. Emily moved in with us that fall. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture, just a quiet acknowledgement that we were better together than apart. Jack was ecstatic to have bonus sisters. The first time Emily called the G, Earl's ours instead of yours, I nearly cried. She caught herself, started to apologize. Ashley cut her off with a hug. "We are yours," she said simply. Madison nodded in agreement. Sarah was released after 14 months, model behavior. She moved in with her parents, took a job at a local nonprofit, started therapy, asked to see the girls when they were ready. It took 6 months before they agreed to lunch. I drove them to the restaurant, waited in the car. "You don't have to do this," I reminded them. "We know," Ashley said, "but we need to." They came out 2 hours later, eyes red but shoulders straight. "She's different," Madison said quietly. "More real. Still not mom," Ashley added. "But maybe something new." Emily held me that night while I processed my own complicated emotions. "They're so much stronger than they should have to be," I whispered. "Because they have you," she replied. "And now they have me too." Life settled into new patterns. Family dinners with 5 instead of 4. Weekend ski trips where Jack showed off his snowboarding skills. College tours with Ashley while Madison and Emily critiqued campus art installations. The pain didn't disappear. It just changed shape. It became something we could carry together, something that made us stronger. On Christmas Eve, 2 years after everything fell apart, I proposed to Emily. Not with a grand gesture or elaborate plan, just a quiet moment by the fire, surrounded by our blended family. The ring was nothing fancy, but her tears were real, and the kids' cheers were deafening. Sarah came to the wedding, sat quietly in the back, watched as our daughters walked Emily down the aisle. Later, she hugged them both. "I'm happy for you," she said. And for once, it wasn't complicated. It was just true. Life isn't a fairy tale. There are no perfect endings. But sometimes, if you're lucky, you get a second chance at happiness. Not despite the broken pieces, but because of them. Ashley started MIT that fall. Madison began applying to art schools. Jack joined the junior ski patrol. Emily and I bought a bigger house, closer to the mountains. And me? I learned that love isn't always enough. But sometimes it's just the beginning. That family isn't about blood or titles. It's about who stays when the storm hits, who helps you rebuild after. The future isn't certain, but then again, it never was. We just notice it more now, appreciate it more, hold each other tighter. And on snowy mornings, when we gather for breakfast before hitting the slopes, I look at our mismatched, beautiful family and know that some things had to break so better things could grow.